I don't think that Base long-term can compete with Solana. I'm going to be honest. Why do people consider Base to be competitive with Solana right now? Well, because it's fast and cheap. Okay. Is it how scalable is that infrastructure? How decentralized is it? Well, when you bring that up with folks today, oftentimes the answer you'll get is, well, users don't care about decentralization.
Hi everyone, welcome to Unchained, your no-hype resource for all things crypto. I'm your host, Laura Shin. We are now featuring quotes from listeners on the show. Today we have one from Jelly Goddess in response to last Friday's interview with Robinhood CEO Vlad Tenev. Jelly Goddess tweets about Robinhood's plans around staking and stablecoins. Quote, stablecoins and staking are cool, but are they just another way to keep retail hooked while regulations catch up? To have your comment featured on Unchained, write a review of the podcast overall, or leave a comment on our video on YouTube or X. This is the December 24th, 2024 episode of Unchained. Robinhood Wallet, Robinhood's DeFi mobile app, takes no fees on same-chain and cross-chain swaps. Use Arbitrum's Layer 2 to swap with low network fees in just a few taps. Other fees may apply. Download on iOS or Android today. Polkadot is the original and leading Layer 0 blockchain with over 2,000 plus developers. And the Polkadot 2.0 upgrade will be a massive accelerator for the ecosystem, making it faster, more secure, and adaptable. Perfect for GameFi and DeFi to build, grow, and scale. Join the community at polkadot.network/ecosystem/community. Did you know High Growth Vault, aka High Gain, by Kelp, offers over 20+% reward rates on ETH by leveraging blue chip DeFi strategies? Maximize your rewards with professional risk management. Get some of the highest rewards on ETH. Visit www.kelpdao.xyz. Today's topic is Solana's banner year. Here to discuss are Lily Liu, president of the Solana Foundation, and Mert Mumtaz, CEO of Helius. Welcome, Lily and Mert.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, Laura. Good to be here.
If you're watching the video, you might notice that I'm not on screen. I fell last week and hit my head, and I'm in the process of healing, which is the point where, I have like a little mini black eye, and there's other horrifying things on my face. So I'm going to spare you and myself and not put myself on camera. All right, so Lily and Mert, Solana has had a monster year in so many ways. Not only was it home to one of the biggest phenomena of the year, which is pump.fun and the meme coin craze, but that frontier really showed what the blockchain can do in terms of transactions per second. I believe it was the GOAT phenomenon took the network to 10.6 million transactions in a single day. The Pengu airdrop last week pushed it to 10.4 million transactions in a day. And a month ago, it bested the last all-time high set in November 2021, reaching $260. And meanwhile, Electric Capital's developer report found that this was the first year since 2016 that an ecosystem other than Ethereum attracted the greatest number of new developers. So, drumroll, that was of course Solana. How does it feel to both of you to have been part of Solana's success?
Do you want to go first, Lily?
Go for it, Mert.
Okay. How does it feel to basically go through this year? Well, I would say personally, I feel very paranoid because it feels as if the higher you go up and the more success you have, the more pressure, the more people, the more things you need to do. And so it's exciting, it's fun, but also very paranoid that we don't get complacent and keep shipping while still steering a much bigger ship. And I try to tell Satoshi all the time, I'll be like, stop working on the phone and come ship some code. We need some work to do here and whatnot. And so I personally mostly feel paranoid, somewhat vindicated, because at first everybody thought we were relatively crazy for actually saying the things that we did in December 2022, such as how we'd come back. And so that wasn't consensus at the time. And so it feels a little better to feel, or at least be proven less crazy, but there's still a ton of work to be done.
And just to clarify, when you said that you tell Anatoly Yakovenko to not work on the phone, for most of us, that means like we're literally just working on our little devices, but you mean on the Solana Seeker, which is the next version of the Solana Saga.
Correct, yes.
And Lily, do you want to add? When I asked this question, you had like a gigantic smile on your face.
Well, To many external observers, and the number of external observers has increased very dramatically over time. It went from rubbernecking, seemingly December 22, January 23. It was like people rubbernecking, a big rig car crash on the side of the highway, and being like, okay, well, that's probably dead. But from my vantage point, it doesn't feel that dramatically different. And we have a little bit of an ethos, I guess, of related concepts. One is that we kind of wake up every day and do the same thing that we did, whether it's December 22 or December of 2024. You wake up and every day is a new day, and you think, we are nothing today, and what are we going to do today, which is going to potentially have a bit of an impact. And if you do that every single day in succession, then frankly, most people don't think that way. Most people do not behave that way. Then you will compound the fruits of your labors as an individual, as a team, as an ecosystem of people with very diverse skill sets. And so, from that kind of micro perspective, actually, nothing really has changed that much. And I think because we are able to do that at scale as an ecosystem, then what you kind of see as having been this arc over the last 2 years. I think that we can continue to, as an ecosystem, ship really cool things, right? So I don't see this as, being a cycle thing, as just being, this one sort of right now, the beanie baby at the moment as meme coins. I don't think that this is something that just comes and goes with whatever the hype cycle is, because the fundamental of it is just an ecosystem that has kind of a culture of building useful things and shipping. So to an external observer, it might seem very unusual, right? Oh, that was a bit of a surprise. But in the way, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
And Lily, I just have to ask you because you used to work at 21, which became Earn, and I always remembered you as a hardcore Bitcoiner. So I remember that when I saw you became the president of the Solana Foundation, I was very surprised. How did that shift take place?
I see them as being very complementary, actually. I absolutely love Bitcoin. I think that we all should. Bitcoin is the one that kicked off this entire space and created this kind of collective dream that we had around not just sound money and store of value. That's part of it. Bitcoin is the one that articulated all of the other things around open finance, right? Why self-custody is important. And so if you'll remember what happened in 2016, 2017 with the block size debate, before that, there was a lot of discourse as to whether Bitcoin is a technology platform, whether it was sound money, store value, which now we call digital gold, whether it was supposed to be a medium of exchange, right? So it's these kind of like three different things that a blockchain could do or a token could do. And now it's like 99%, everyone's like, yeah, Bitcoin is digital gold. And if it does these other things, that will be at some point in the future, maybe Lightning, maybe something else, maybe L2s, whatever it might be. But Bitcoin doesn't need to be any of those things. Okay. So then back in the early days, of course, Silicon Valley, which is, Silicon Valley sees everything as being a potential technology platform. Then Silicon Valley went in, okay, well, if Bitcoin's not going to be that technology platform, who is? And basically everything else after Bitcoin is going to be that technology platform or seeking to be that technology platform. So the way I see it now is the vision is still always the same that Bitcoin gave us, right? Open finance, programmable money, self-custody leading to self-sovereignty. And Bitcoin is not going to be that open finance technology platform. So then the question is, who is? And what drew me to Solana was in 2021, I just started using Solana as a user. And I was really blown away by it because I thought, okay, this actually kind of feels like the Web2 internet. You click something, you click a button, that thing happens, and it's a good user experience. So of all of the things that I saw in 2021, I thought this is the only one that can sort of be that complement to Bitcoin and do the things that Bitcoin has chosen not to do. So to me, I don't really see it as a choice. I think it's been wrongly framed in our industry for the longest time as this being sort of you're either a Bitcoiner or you're not, right? That's in my mind the wrong way to think about it.
And Mert, you in a way are almost like this voice for Solana online. And I was curious, well, why don't we just start with what it is that Helius Labs does, how you came to found it, but then also how you keen to be this voice for Solana and like why you chose Solana.
So Helius is a developer platform. Basically, if you want to build apps, fast, cheap, scalable apps, you use Helius to make that a reality. The origin story of Helius and actually how I started being super loud about Solana is actually kind of the same. So I used to work at Coinbase before this, and I used to work on a system that handles pretty much all blockchains. So Ethereum, and at that time it was Polygon, Optimism was just coming online, and Avalanche, even Polkadot. And there I used to work on different chains, and something always bugged me the most, and it still does today, which is how come everybody's using these chains for Ponzi-nomics and weird yield farming things as opposed to actually taking the potential and building some useful things that I can use today. And at the time, my thesis for that was, well, there's a bunch of reasons, right? There's obviously scalability issues, there are regulation issues, there's a bunch of different issues. But the one that I could probably help the most on with my skill set with cloud infrastructure was actually giving developers more expressiveness and abstracting away sort of the pain of just doing things on chain. And I used to build things on Solana on my own time anyways, during the weekends or at night while I used to work at Coinbase. And this was at the time when there were really no block explorers or zero analytics sites. So I would just write the code myself. And I used to build also on Ethereum. And my thesis at the time was something like this, which is, okay, so if I want to solve this problem, then I need to make it easier for app developers to build things. Now I can either do this on Ethereum or on Solana. On Ethereum, though, there's a lot of things that are not in my control, right? So scalability, and future roadmap things, these things I have no control over. And for Ethereum to successfully scale, it's going to need to require, at the time, the merge to go through, right? Transition to proof of stake, 4844, L2s to get to stage 2, and all these different things. And while I think it will get there, Solana was kind of the opposite, where it was like, it's a scalable base layer. And if you just come in as an ecosystem team, you can fix a bunch of these problems and have a lot of influence over, and your fate is more in your own hands. And you can just build things, right? And at the time, Solana had basically 3-digit number of developers, I would say. And people used to kind of troll me for this because we're a developer platform. And everybody was like, well, why aren't you going where the developers are? And my thought was, well, it's going to be the fastest growing if you can actually solve some of these problems, which is, basically what ended up happening so far, at least. And while I was doing that, at the time on Twitter, I used to actually first be a reply guy against Solana people, where the NFT influencers back in the day, before analytics sites existed, would say something like, mint my weird ape because it's going super fast, but nobody could check what was happening. And I would write a script and I'd be like, but you have 99% of the supply. Like you're just, and so I would reply guy them doing that. And then somewhere along the way, there was a lot of threads as Solana started picking up momentum about like fundamental technical misunderstandings of how Solana worked. And having already studied how the tech works on multiple chains, at first I would just say like, this is wrong, and here's why you're wrong. And then that basically, I did that so often that people would just tag me on Twitter and be like, Mert, can you come confirm this? Or like somebody would shoot me a message on Telegram like, hey, dude, this is true. And then it just never stopped. And I mean, I don't think I'm the voice of Solana by any means. I think certainly there's quite a few different voices, which is what's ideal. I think there should actually be more anyways, like at least 10x more. But it's basically just being super annoyed by guys, even if they're from Solana, saying just patently false things.
Okay. Well, as we mentioned, clearly the enthusiasm that you guys have has now infiltrated many other people. And so we saw that in November, dApps on Solana generated $365 million in revenue. So Pump.Fun obviously accounted for $100 million or more than $100 million of that. But, one thing that I have noticed is a lot of the dApps that are coming to Solana are super similar to what we've seen on Ethereum. So do you expect that they'll kind of continue to compete in these similar ways? Like, I feel like Pumped Up Fun is kind of the one new area, meme coins generally, but like other than that, I don't know if have seen too much that's super differentiated.
I think you will. When it comes to the financial economy, there's a lot of cool stuff that's cooking in payments that I think you're going to see probably in a few months' time, if you haven't already started to see it. And so I think that broadening what we can actually do on chain is what Solana is going to contribute to this space. We've been through, I guess, some form of Beanie Baby cycle one after the other for the last 10 years, right? Maybe more than that if you count since the beginning of Bitcoin. And so the critique oftentimes we'll all be intimately aware is that this is really just Ponzonomics speculation gone wild and there's nothing useful. And I would argue one of the reasons why there hasn't been a lot which has strong utility is because, well, if you look at most human economic activity, it's not in trading, right? Token in, token out. Most human economic activity is actually about the payment for goods and services, a transactional economy. And the reason why that doesn't exist on chain right now is because it has not been able to, because the market for payment transaction that cost 2 minutes and take 2 minutes and cost $2 to click a button there's no market for that. And that's what we've been able to offer at scale as an industry until you have something like Solana come along, right? So you had to have liquidity in stablecoins, and then you also have to have a performant network that can actually support payments to be able to support a transactional economy. And then I think you can actually broaden what you can actually do on chain outside of sort of speculative wave after speculative wave. And I think what that's actually going to do is I think that's going to benefit the crypto economy, the on-chain economy as a whole, because what you have right now is there's going to be there's like the ICO stuff and there's the NFT stuff. And right now you've got meme coins. And so people pile in because of the speculative fervor. And then once that speculation is over, then people kind of go back to their brokerage accounts, right? But if you can actually do cool stuff on chain, which is not just trading, then people are going to be more likely to leave their money on chain because it's better than being in their brokerage account. And I think we're starting to really build and support that economy. And guess what? It's going to be on a layer which is both liquid, fast, and cheap.
I would also somewhat challenge the notion of doing what Ethereum is doing. I think that used to be the case. In fact, I was quite annoyed by that. And that's why we came up with only possible on Solana, right? Do things that are only possible here, such that you have a moat, such that you can't just vampire attack with a copy paste of the same code base. And I would say that used to be the case, but I don't think it's quite the case today. In fact, I think it's the opposite, where you saw that Solana obviously has a meme coin ecosystem, and now there are teams that have meme coin funds or ecosystem funds dedicated to memes, or they're really trying hard to get a meme coin ecosystem going through basically any means necessary. People even trying to, all L1s really try to, and this is in a positive way, not in a negative way, like basically just play or follow the super team playbook of spinning up a bunch of different entities around the world and getting the developer communities there going. And there's also some things that are relatively more unique to Solana, which is, things like DePIN, right? You start to get somewhat of a flywheel there once you have Helium, High Mapper, Render, IONET, etc. And I would say and then like just there's boring things that are quite different as well, like the evolution of MEV, right? Solana MEV looks quite different than Ethereum MEV. The developer ecosystem, network extensions, which I don't like that name, but they are quite different. And so, but like fundamentally, it's just open source software, right? So there will always be copying from all ends in a free market. But I think it's like quite a bit different than maybe 2 years ago, where now the newer incumbents tend to try to compete with Solana, right? Like before they go live, they will say, oh, well, we'll be faster than Solana, right?
Okay. Well, yeah. So, some of the activities that you called out are ones that I do plan to ask you about. So I think you're right that you're onto something about where it could potentially go. I did want to ask though, because, as everybody famously as everybody talks about, Anatoly has famously said that his vision for Solana is that it would be a decentralized Nasdaq. But because right now it does seem like the activity on Solana that's found product market fit is the meme coins. And, I don't want to make a judgment call, but obviously there are people that, um, they kind of question the sort of validity of that activity. I think also critics will point to incidents like the whole racist meme coins trend, or the one, that happened with the live stream where people were threatening to kill themselves or abuse a child or whatever if their coin didn't reach a certain market cap. And I just wondered, how do you square Anatoly's vision for Solana as the decentralized Nasdaq against the meme coins craze that happened on Solana?
So I've been asked this a few times, and the way I like framing it is, okay, so meme coins are a thing that exists, or fundamentally speculation is something that exists in crypto, and it's fundamental to it, right? First you have Bitcoin, then you have the ICOs, then you have NFTs, then you have meme coins. And it just so happens that Solana is or at least at the time, I still think it is, but in the historical context, at the time was the best place to launch tokens, right? When you say you want to build a decentralized Nasdaq, what are you actually saying? You're saying we want to build a product or a system where trading is easy, price discovery is optimal, and the UX for both the people who are supplying the liquidity and also people who are trading is optimized. Now, that trading, this chain does not control, right? The chain does not say if token type equals meme coin, then enable, or if real product, don't enable, right? It's the token is a container, it's a vessel, and it can take many different shapes. Now, it just so happens that meme coins are the big thing in all of crypto this year, right? And you can see this with Flanker, I believe, on Base, but also different chains also trying to have different meme coins. I mean, there's entire chains that are meme coins, right? Like Doge. And meme coins have been around this whole time. And so I think the meme coin indictment is actually much more of an indictment on the entire industry. And so how do you reconcile Toly's vision with what's actually happening? And I've actually asked them this at Breakpoint, this exact question. And he'll say something like, well, you look at the early days of the internet and people will just use it for whatever they want. But then when the actual time comes, the system is battle tested for the real use cases if they happen. And so that's the similar way I think about it, where the meme coins today, and a good example is actually historical context, NFTs, right? So NFTs back in the day used to actually take out the chain in 2021, 2022, and they were just weird monkey pictures, right? But the engineers then learned a ton of lessons that were shortcomings in that system, and then they improved it such that it doesn't go down from that type of activity anymore. And it turns out that's just type of token. And so when meme coins came online, then the chain didn't go down again. And in fact, the chain was optimized for the movement of tokens, right? And so Solana has a thesis called FAT, right? Founders, Apps, Tokens. And the idea is you obviously want the decentralized Nasdaq to be the best place for launching, creating, transferring, burning, whatever operation you want to take on those tokens. And those tokens, the chain is not opinionated on, right? Today they're meme coins, tomorrow they're IWAs, they're DePIN coins, they're stable coins. They can take many forms.
Yeah, and actually to build on, or it's like what you just said, that reminded me of what Lily said a little while ago about how payments are a big activity. Watching the meme coin thing, it reminds me of how some little kids I know spend so much time trading their Pokemon cards. And it feels like so much the same activity, except this is on chain. So I do think that there, is something there that's just inherent to human nature. All right, so in a moment, we're going to talk about how Solana has been growing, but also where it faces competition. But first, a quick word from the sponsors who make this show possible. Polkadot is the original and largest Layer 0 blockchain with over 2,000 plus developers. And the anticipated Polkadot 2.0 upgrade will be a massive accelerator for the ecosystem, upgrading the infrastructure with 8 times higher transaction throughput and twice as fast block times, perfectly tailored core time for the needs of every protocol, trustless bridges internally and into Ethereum, Cosmos, Near, Binance Smart Chain, and revise tokenomics and the implementation of a token burn to reduce inflation. Perfect for GameFi and DeFi to build, grow, and scale with one of the most active crypto communities in the space. Polkadot recently announced a partnership with Mythical Games, bringing top games like NFT Rivals with over 650,000 players and 43 million transactions to pave the way for GameFi and the Polkadot ecosystem. Get your Web3 ideas to market fast with economics that work for you. Think big, build bigger with Polkadot. Join the community at polkadot.network/ecosystem/community. Big news for DeFi traders. Robinhood Wallet, Robinhood's non-custodial wallet mobile app, has partnered with Arbitrum to make access to L2 swaps easier than ever. Enjoy gasless swaps and cross-chain swaps on Arbitrum and other networks. The best part? Robinhood Wallet takes no fees on same-chain or cross-chain swaps. Other fees may still apply. With gasless swaps, you can pay network fees with the same token you're swapping instead of ETH. Cross-chain swaps make it incredibly simple to swap crypto without any manual bridging. Download the Robinhood Wallet mobile app today on iOS or Android and join people in over 140 countries exploring Web3 with Arbitrum. Get some of the highest rewards on ETH with the High Growth Vault by Kelp. High Gain leverages blue-chip DeFi strategies with RS-ETH across Aave, Pendle, Usual, and Elixir, managed by strategy experts UltraYield and Upshift, to get you 20+% APR on ETH, all in a single click. Deposit your assets and receive HG-ETH, a reward-bearing token that represents your vault position while keeping you liquid in DeFi. Trade or use HG-ETH on platforms like Pendle, Balancer, and more, while still raking in yields. It's time to get high on rewards with High Gain. Deposit now at www.kelpdao.xyz. We are now featuring comments from listeners on the show. Today we have one from Big Mad Johnny commenting on the latest Bits and Bips, where they discussed how the Chinese got crypto out of China despite capital controls. He says, quote, "They literally withdraw it in Australia through casino shenanigans. It is what is driving the whole foreign buyer property market. This is an actual thing. And once they get settled here, the family continues in the same vein. Funnel through casino, buy property, gain residency, move family member, repeat." And Ong through 2006 filled in more details, saying that these casino shenanigans are, as an example, quote, "such as using the junket operators to facilitate gambling with funds. They're actually designed as hotel charges, thus bypassing restrictions on currency transfers from China." Super interesting. Remember, if you want to have your quote featured on Unchained, please write a review of the podcast or leave a comment on our video on YouTube or X. Back to my conversation with Lily and Mert. So as you mentioned earlier, Solana attracted the most new devs in 2024. Why do you think that is? And if you were a dev, coming in today, like how would you think about that choice of going into either the EVM ecosystem or the SVM ecosystem?
First, the first question on why this year was a particularly big year for Solana developers. I think a few things. One is, and we actually wrote a post about this about 2 years ago now, and it's basically played out roughly what we thought would happen, which is, let's say you're a developer and you want to build something in crypto. Well, what do you want, right? You want something that scales such that and is cheap and actually works as your business grows and scales, so that all you have to do is work on your product, right? You don't want to be bothered by weird infrastructure stuff that you're not an expert on, or that you can't fix anyways, even if you wanted to, right? Because you're not going to fix the entire chain. It's a decentralized chain, right? If you wanted that, you would maybe go with an app chain, but then with an app chain, you need to bootstrap liquidity and get all the ecosystem integrations going, and it's a lot of upfront capital. And so with that framing in mind, then the question becomes, okay, so what do you build on? Well, fundamentally, you want to build on where, one, there's the most ecosystem integrations. So things like, what do the wallets look like? What do the DEXs look like? Can I get support from the community, like the founders? Do they have ecosystem grants? Do they have a risk-based capital system with VCs? And then once you go through those, okay, well, then you have a few options. And it's probably going to be something like, at least for this past year, it's probably going to look something like, well, there's Solana, there's something like Sui, some of the move chains, and then there are some L2s. But then within the L2s, you kind of have to pick which one of those L2s you want to pick. And that becomes confusing. And then with Move, it is like, to give credit to Move, specifically Sui, they are a good ecosystem. But then you have to be like, well, it's early. And so I'm taking a big risk here because it hasn't been battle tested. There isn't that much community yet. Maybe there will be. And so Solana is like in the sweet spot of battle tested, performance, cheap, but also has a very credible path to, 1000xing the scale. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. And I did also want to ask, just, at this moment in time, it does feel like the main competitors really are Base. And then, as you mentioned, Aptos and Sui are kind of also of interest to developers. But for Base in particular, how does Solana plan to compete against the inherent advantages that a Coinbase incubated layer 2 has?
I don't think that Base long-term can compete with Solana. I'm going to be honest. Why do people consider Base to be competitive with Solana right now? Well, because it's fast and cheap. Okay. Is it how scalable is that infrastructure? How decentralized is it? Well, when you bring that up with folks today, oftentimes the answer you'll get is, well, users don't care about decentralization. What I find to be really interesting about that is it's the same people who are saying that then will flip in the same conversation and say the reason why Ethereum mainnet is better placed in Solana is because it's more decentralized. So which is it? Does decentralization matter or not, right? Then there's the whole conversation as to whether L2s are parasitic to mainnet, to Ethereum mainnet or not. I think it's actually far worse than that. I think that the L2s, the corporate L2s, such as Base, and there's others that, because the sequencer fees have been so profitable for corporations such as Coinbase, then many other corporations are looking at that just purely from a P&L perspective as well. And the incentives there are going to keep on creeping in the direction where they will just compete with Ethereum mainnet. I think it's far worse than being parasitic. I think it's cannibalistic. And what you're seeing now is you're seeing with these corporate L2s, they keep on saying they're doing this to scale Ethereum. Yet at the same time, they're bringing assets from bridging them from ETH L1 to natively issuing them on the L2. And at some point, they will build enough scale because they as well want to have full spectrum of application verticals from the DeFi stuff, the DePIN stuff, the meme coins, the NFTs, so on and so forth, that at some point they're going to think, well, why shouldn't we just be a general purpose performant L2 ourselves? And it's not clear to me how that actually really benefits the Ethereum ecosystem long term, right? Because the incentive will always be for a corporate chain that has go-to-market advantages, given the backing of Coinbase Inc., to eventually go and accumulate their own network effect and throw that weight around.
And well, to ask a little bit, just about this difference between Solana and Ethereum is, as Mert mentioned, Solana is also pursuing these network extensions. And I'm sure you saw people have been making fun of the name. But it does seem like these are so similar to rollups, but you're not calling them rollups. So, what are they? How are they different from rollups? Yeah. And
Sure.
How do you see them fitting into this notion of Solana having this monolithic or integrated architecture?
So there's two things there. One is and by the way, I don't actually agree with the term network extension because I think it's too large and it doesn't refer to something specific, which changes the underlying characteristics of the thing. In terms of the big difference, it's basically just a fundamental property of L2s on Ethereum, right? Why were L2s created? Well, because you can't do all the transactions on Ethereum mainnet. And so what you have to do is you have to do them off-chain, off Ethereum, and then you have to roll them back up onto Ethereum, right? And so what you've done is you've taken execution off the L1. On Solana, execution is plenty, right? The entire chain basically just tries to maximize for execution capabilities. And so on Solana, what you have so for example, Helius and Light released something called ZK compression. And we did not call this a network extension, by the way. We just call it ZK compression. That's the name of it. It compresses data with ZK. But it's not actually a roll-up in the traditional sense of Ethereum in any way, because the transactions still happen on the Solana blockchain. And the only thing that's different is how the data is compressed or stored. And the reason why it doesn't apply to Solana to call that like a rollup is because the terminology that was created to be very EVM centric, right? There's certain problems on Ethereum, and then there's these solutions called rollups or state channels or plasma, all these different things that exist to solve those problems. But Solana is a different chain, and those problems specifically do not exist. And so their solutions are different and have different characteristics. And so it's a weird attempt to basically simplify it for the user, but from a technical perspective, they are quite different, right? Because you don't need to take execution off Solana for it to scale like you do on Ethereum, but you do have to do other things. And then the other big difference is when like the framing of this, right? When we say things like Solana is pursuing network extensions. Okay, what does that mean? Because who is Solana, right? On Ethereum, the reason why we say Ethereum is pursuing the modular roadmap is because the core devs of the L1 physically changed the L1 to be a customer for L2s, right? They added blob space. Why do they do that? The entire purpose is for L2s to post data onto the L1, right? They re-architected the entire system just to pursue that. On Solana, that's not the case. And you can talk to any Solana core dev about this. They will just say increase bandwidth, reduce latency. They will not say anything else. They will say those two or four words. And if people think it's valuable to build something on top of this, such as a rollup in the Ethereum sense or a network extension in Solana sense, do that. We don't care. What we're going to do is we're going to scale execution on the L1. We're never going to change the roadmap to account for your L2s. That doesn't matter to us. And so, but it's a permissionless system, right? And so if people think it's lucrative to build an L2 and raise a venture fund or whatever to go on Solana and build that thing, and maybe there's a gap that they're addressing, then they will do it. But the L1 has no opinions on this.
All right. Well, I did also want to talk about another kind of, I don't know if point of contention, but definitely a differentiator that people argue about between Solana and Ethereum is the MEV issue. I see people criticizing MEV on Solana by saying things like, so somebody pointed out that there's one Solana operator that earns $2 million a day by sandwiching memecoin users. Someone else pointed out that it looks like a lot of wash trading bots are doing a single transaction and rotating to a new wallet. So they were saying 300K transactions is actually 300K daily active addresses. Somebody else said, most MEV on Solana today appears to be toxic MEV, which worsens the experience of users. What do you have to say to these criticisms?
Well, a few of those are not correct by numbers. So when you say that most of MEV on Solana is toxic, then first that presumes that you know all the MEV on Solana, which most people don't. But so what we measure is REV, right? Real economic value, which is the accumulation of priority tips paid to prioritize your transactions, plus the JITO tips required to land JITO bundles. And of those JITO bundles, which is the MEV infrastructure, roughly 7 to 8% or some single digits are due to sandwiching, which is what would be malicious, right? And so actually, if you look at the numbers, most of the activity on chain, most of the revenue is simply from people wanting to get access to block space as fast as possible, right? Land their transactions during congestion, or be the first to get a coin, or be first to get a better price, all these things. So it's competition for block space. As far as the other MEV stuff goes, I think it's a good criticism that Solana MEV is certainly relatively less mature than Ethereum, right? Partly because obviously it's been around for many fewer years, but also because the architecture is fundamentally different. So Ethereum has a mempool by default, Solana doesn't. And so JITO added a mempool to cater to a different type of like searcher. And when they found out that there was a lot of sandwiching going on, they actually shut down the mempool, right? And so that actually reduced the number of sandwiches. But what that does is it opens the door for private side room deals, right? So the actor that you mentioned that makes $2 million in profit, and by the way, it's not $2 million like every day or something. those are the highest days, and we've been running the numbers on this. And the question becomes, how bad is the situation, right? Like, if this person keeps getting revenue from malicious MEV, how long until they amass a significant percent of the stake of the network to become a centralization risk? And so the rate of growth. And so when we look at the rate of growth, then the question you ask is, okay, is this bad in a year, or is it bad in 10 years, or is it bad in 5 years, right? You need to kind of understand that to conceptualize the solution. And so far, it's bad, right? MEV is bad. And DFlow actually just released something on this this week around conditional liquidity. The Ellipsis guys released a sandwich resistant AMM. Camino and others are doing RFQ systems. And then Jito is reworking how their stuff works. And then the end solution is actually already clear on Solana, which is something called MCP, multiple concurrent proposers, where you maximize block space or competition for producing blocks, and users have a choice to basically pick the most competitive for them, which in this case would mean lesser MEV. And the more you reduce latency, the less of these MEV games you have. And so the end term of that is clear. The question is, what does that look like in the meantime? And I would say in the meantime, what's happening right now is a combination of app level solutions like the ones I just mentioned, plus some improvements on Jito's side. And so the question is like, and when you contrast this like Ethereum, for example, Ethereum also has MEV and malicious MEV. In fact, Jared from Subway is the biggest spender of gas on the entire chain, which is a sandwich bot, right? And so, but like people are okay with that on Ethereum because it's been mitigated to such a level where perhaps people are like, okay, whatever, this is a small amount of MEV and it's democratized across validators. And so Solana says, well, we don't want to just give up just yet on this problem. We want to first see how we can mitigate on different levels and then see how bad the problem gets, how much it improves, et cetera. And so there's still room for experimentation there.
Yeah. So, here we've been discussing some of the, criticisms that people are making of Solana. There, after Solana's amazing, incredible 2024, it does look like there's potentially one little hiccup on the short-term future here, which is that Solana looks like it's on the verge of some big VC token unlocks. And, I'm seeing mostly March, maybe even a little bit in February as well. And I wondered what you expected to happen at that time, if there's going to be some big price drop, or just how Solana plans to deal with what looks like, an unleashing of liquidity.
Well, I can speak on my end quickly, which is that my time horizon is longer than that. So I've been hearing about unlocks for the past 2-3 years. All chains have them. This is not a specific thing to Solana. All chains except Ethereum, of course, and Bitcoin, right? The competitors that we have listed out, for example, Sui, I believe has like 80% locked still, right? And so it's not necessarily a Solana specific thing. And for me, what matters is like the time horizon, right? If I'm going to be chasing price trends for the next 6 months, that's a totally different mindset than I'm going to be here building for the next 5, 10, 12 years. And so personally, it doesn't affect me. And importantly, it won't affect the startups and the builders on the chain that are actually building for the long term.
That's from the FTX estate, and that's been known for a long time. That was all disclosed, I believe, back in 2022 as well, exactly what the unlock schedule is. And so this is not new information. Of course, people think about it a little bit more when it's more close on the horizon. It's not something that we as the foundation have any control over whatsoever, right? So.
Okay, and actually, just one question. Is that also for the February bit that kind of starts a little bit earlier? It was like 3 million and change in February and 6 million and change in March. Oh, okay. Well, and why is it like a two parts like that?
I think that's probably just the way it was originally constructed when tokens are sold a long time ago to FTX.
Oh, let's go back to the mobile conversation. As Mert mentioned earlier, Solana has been focused on building mobile, and we saw that this whole trend happened where, not to say that people weren't interested in the saga, it had some interest, but it really only took off after things like the Bach airdrop and stuff happened. So I wondered, what you expected to happen with the Solana Seeker, or what benchmarks are you aiming for with that?
Yeah, so Solana Labs builds a phone, and Solana Labs is a different entity from the foundation, and so and we're certainly very supportive of Labs building Seeker. I think it's pretty unique within all of crypto because much of crypto has been spending time and energy innovating on building infrastructure for more infrastructure for more infrastructure, and meanwhile, most of the people who use the internet outside of blockchain obviously are doing that through their mobile phones. And as an industry, we haven't really been able to provide a consumer experience that is either native in that platform or even competitive with how people just use the internet today, right? Some of those are because of external reasons. The App Store is largely being controlled by Apple and Google, and the economics of the App Stores being such that if you were, for example, operating an NFT marketplace and had to pay 30% of your GMV, well, that just wouldn't be economic because you as the platform aren't actually taking a rake of your GMV, right? Anywhere close to that extent. So those are some sort of some issues in just the overall structure of the mobile landscape that don't comport very well into crypto. But what I think is cool about Seeker is, first of all, it's a very different price point. And people are still very used to their Apple and their to their iPhones and then their Android devices. But I think that at a $500 price point, it's just going to be a lot more accessible to people that want to potentially have a secondary phone, which many people in the world already do, and have that phone be custom built for an increasing number of things that you can really only do in crypto. And there's been an ongoing debate of whether having additional sort of hardware is going to be worth it for the consumer in order to do this thing. And I think that because the sort of trade-offs between convenience and security are fundamentally different within crypto, I do think there is a space for carrying an additional device. And I think we also learned from the Saga, implement a number of those learnings into Seeker. But I think for crypto as a whole, if we are going to be relevant to some large subset of the 5 billion people who use the internet, then you've got to be relevant on mobile. And you can't just rely on asking Apple and Google very nicely to change some of the rules, because who knows when that's going to happen. And current indications are that it's not going to be anytime soon. So you got to build our own experience for that. And it's not just the hardware device itself. Of course, that's the most tangible, but it's also the Solana mobile stack, right? It's also driving folks in the ecosystem to have mobile DApp ready implementations of whatever their application might be. And it's also not just Seeker that's focused on building out a mobile experience. On the other side of the world, there's a $99 phone, Web3 enabled phone, Jambo, and so there's kind of like in the ecosystem as a whole, there's going to be different price point devices that are going to be available to folks in probably different geographies who want to provide this experience.
And you referenced this issue with the Apple App Store and Google App Stores taking a huge cut of transactions on their apps. And how do you think that battle will play out between basically crypto apps and chains that want to get access to people's phones so they can transact without that overhead? How do you think that war will be won, if it will ever be won?
So I asked this question actually to Anatoly on my podcast when I grilled him about why he's still working on this thing. And basically what he said is the market just doesn't make sense, right? When Apple and Google take 30%, up to 30% of your transactions, for a developer, that's a no-go. That completely destroys your business margins and limits the possible number of crypto applications. And so Anatoly Anatoly has built phones before, and he worked on phones most of his career, or a large part of his career. And the only way to get through here is to find PMF such that Apple and Google feel the heat, right? Such that they can see, well, there's a growing market, or there's some shift in the market sentiment or structure that is being caused by this, right? And the only way that happens is if the seeker or the Solana mobile stack is actually successful on some regard. And by the way, the other thing I will say around the phone thing, like Lily said, is it's Solana Labs that does it. And Solana Labs is also not the entity that works on Solana, the blockchain, anymore, right? It's actually Anza. And so when I troll Tolly about, hey man, we need resources here, all the resources that are possible are already allocated to Solana through Anza, FireDancer, Helius, Jito, et cetera, all this stuff. And so that is basically an independent project of people who wouldn't have worked on the blockchain anyways. So it's a moonshot, I think. But I think it's also clearly serves an existing segment of the market that needs it, right? You don't want to be paying as an app builder 30% of your profits or revenue to Apple. That's just not going to scale, and it needs to change at some point.
Yeah. All right. Well, last quick question, because I do have to run, but I did want to ask about the DePIN thing. So why don't you just tell us quickly what it is that you're looking forward to in 2025 when it comes to the development of DePIN on Solana?
I think DePIN is certainly an important part. But what I'm the most excited about is I think just really building the capital markets presence on Solana. I think that's always been the original purpose. I think DePIN is certainly an important category of that because I think DePIN is when people talk about how is crypto going to be real world useful and real world accessible. There's certainly the very sensational distraction of these very speculative fervors such as meme coins. But what's also happening is there's a lot of really cool, unique things that are happening within DePIN that you really just can't do outside of crypto, right? Because nowhere else can you go motivate a truly decentralized network of individuals to go bootstrap hardware and bootstrap a network, which is actually real world useful, such as Helium, right? Such as Hivemapper. So I think we're going to see a number of more of those projects that maybe got started in the last 12 months or something to actually scale. It does take a number of years to actually go build the tech behind it and build the network behind that and get people to actually be implementing these nodes in the wild. So I think we're going to be seeing a number of cool things on that horizon. I think something like 20% of Helium's network is powered by their MVNO in the US. About 20% of that's already powered by Helium nodes, which is pretty amazing. So I think as a category, it's very substantial in terms of actually contributing value to humans, which is cool. But I think more broadly than that, it also introduces these new types of assets into the global economy that really don't exist anywhere else, right? You could call them tokens, but they're tokens that have a different type of value and represent a different type of activity that really anyone can access. So that's what I think is the contribution of DePIN and its contribution towards what I think has always been the goal of crypto, which is to enable these global financial markets.
And Mert, can you give us your 1 minute response?
Sure. So in 2025, from a technical perspective, we'll be looking to double block space, right? And also push FireDancer live, which means more redundancy, more safety, but more decentralization. And why that matters is because DePIN can't really exist on an island. One of the reasons, or if you think about DePIN from first principles, why does it work especially well on Solana? Well, one, because they need to facilitate a lot of global payments, right? And Solana's local fee markets are such that some other activity going on chain, such as a memecoin mint or something, does not affect your payments fees for just doing basic DePIN payouts to, let's say, people mapping the network in Hivemapper, right? So that's very important. But then also, once people in a DePIN economy earn tokens, it's like, what can they do with it? One, they obviously need to be able to spend it or do something with it in the context of a global shared state, right? So maybe you put your Helium tokens that you owned, and then you take out a loan against it from one of the borrow lend markets. And so it becomes very important that you have a global ecosystem all in one chain. And that's why DePIN really succeeds. But then also, these are open source projects. So there's a lot of things that Helium has built, for example, that Render and then Hivemapper have modified to work for their own case. Things like governance for token holders, things like ZK compression, where you can actually mass distribute hundreds of thousands of tokens or hundreds of thousands of different addresses for, $10. Things like this, where it really helps your margins. And so when you start having that, then basically now I also angel invest. I get like 2-3 DePIN pitches per week, right? So one of the newer ones is, for example, Beam Network, where it's a decentralized CDN. There's now decentralized energy grids, decentralized charging grids, decentralized health and wellness. There's all sorts of different experimentations going on, and you kind of have the support system where like-minded DePIN folks can kind of opine and then talk with each other on the best go-to-market, best tech stack, all these different things. And you start basically capturing the mind share of all those builders. And when you combine that with, for example, the consumer focus that we talked about, but also the mobile focus, it all plays together very nicely, where you do things on your phone, you're a consumer, you optimize for the consumer, it's scalable, but then there's also liquidity from the chain being decentralized Nasdaq or aspiring to be. And it's really like the synergy of all those things that makes that possible.
All right. Well, it has been a pleasure having you both on Unchained. Thank you so much. Where can people learn about each of you and your work?
That would be Twitter. You will see an angry bald guy on your home feed.
Lily's internet appears to have frozen, but you can find her on Twitter or X at @CALilyLiu. Before we go, I wanted to flag an error in the news recap of last week's podcast regarding Caroline Crenshaw and her position as SEC commissioner. We mentioned that the Senate Banking Committee had canceled her confirmation vote and that would effectively end her tenure. That's not accurate. While the vote cancellation prevents her from being reconfirmed this season, it doesn't immediately remove her from the SEC. Crenshaw technically remains in her position under an extension that runs until the end of 2025, unless someone else is nominated and confirmed to fill her seat. Thanks so much for joining us today. To learn more about Lily, Mert, and Solana, check out the show notes for this episode. Unchained is produced by me, Laura Shin, with help from Matt Pilchard, Juan Aranovich, Megan Gabus, Pam Majumdar, and Margaret Correa. Thanks for listening.